Welcome back after your Easter break. I hope it has been restful. I hope that everyone in your family is staying safe at home and that you are too. And I really hope that you are ready to get stuck back in, because I have to say that I have rinsed everything that there is to watch on Netflix and Amazon and everything else. So I'm bored to my back teeth and completely ready to be getting on with the next term. So we are going to be finishing off the last 2 lessons of your migration investigation, which we've been doing since before the half term. Okay, now this entire unit has been a bit of an experiment for you guys in working from home and learning from home, but it's also been a bit of an experiment for us in that we're getting you to do all of your work digitally. If you've been struggling to submit your work digitally, then there are 2 different ways in which you can do this. The first way is to use the digital booklet. You're typing into the booklet and you are completing the work in there or in the spreadsheets that you were given for lessons 4A and 4B. And the work that you do when you work in that sheet or in that document that I've given you, I can see it, your teacher can see it, and we can assess your work, we can write comments, we can suggest things, but you do have to click submit on the tasks, because if you don't, it looks to me like your work is missing, okay? And that's going to lead to you getting contacted home, parents, blah, 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 okay? And if you've been doing it, then that's a shame. If you're emailing me your work, I can't upload it for you. So although I can see that you're doing it, it's still not ticked off as being done. So you do need to go and click that. If you are doing your work on paper, that is totally valid, okay? You can do that, but just take a photo of it with your mobile phone for me, please. Upload it using the Google Classroom app and still click that submit button, okay? So, last 2 lessons of this unit. This lesson is lesson 5, although technically lesson 6 because I had a 4A and a 4B. So this is lesson 5 and we're looking at data analysis. So, our data analysis then, what we're doing now, having made all of those beautiful graphs that you did, having made those graphs, we want to look at them and say, okay, well, what do we know from this? How do we analyze data? This is perhaps to create percentages, but certainly it's going to require us looking at the results that we found, the graphs that we made, and comparing them to our hypothesis. What did we think originally we would find? And we're going to start to explain today, using a PL structure, why those results came out the way they did. So let's take, for example, then. Firstly, we're going to look at our PL structure. This is an example of a graph that you will have made, probably with slightly different colors, okay? And that was from our secondary data analysis. Now, when we're looking at any graph, we want to start off with our point. We want to say, what is the main thing that we see here, okay? And it might be, in this example, say, for instance, picking out particular countries that come up quite significantly on this map. It might have been talking about the areas, the geographical areas, that lots of people come from Asia and the Middle East, or that many of our students come from Africa. Or we might talk about places that don't show up at all. Say, for instance, we have no students from North America, and it appears, although it may not be the reality, that there are very few students from the Caribbean. Now, we're going to come back to this point about problems with our data, the fact that we know we have a large Caribbean community at Preston Manor School, and yet the data says there are almost no Caribbean students at our school, okay? And that obviously doesn't match up with what we know personally to be the case, and so we can look at that in our next lesson when we're doing evaluations. So then, if you were looking at this graph, we made a point. We've said, here's where we find people are from. Here's where people are not from. Here is our evidence to back it up. So we might use some percentages at this point. We might use some figures at this point. And then we're going to give an explanation. Why is it that many people are coming from those countries, okay, their students' country of origin is from those places? And we might talk about the fact that Brent is really diverse. Okay, London is very diverse, that London is a place that attracts many migrants, that many of our students and our teachers are the children of migrants. Okay, and then we're going to link this to another piece of data. And actually, you know, linking this particular graph would be very easy with the perception data we collected. Let's look at that first question we collected in terms of the survey. The first question we asked was, which of the following do you think is the most common country of origin for pupils at Preston Manor? Now, I've got two graphs here. And the reason for that is that the graph that you've probably made is the one on the left, okay? And that's the data that I gave you. But the reason I had to give you that is it was last year's data. That's the data from 2019 when we collected 360 something surveys, okay? This year, unfortunately, we only collected 101, and it's taken a while to get to that number. But this is the data on the right-hand side over here from this year. So you can see that you guys in year 9 currently think differently to last year's year 9, okay? So our responses were slightly different. Okay, last year many people said the United Kingdom or Poland would be the largest sort of most common country of origin for students at Preston Manor. This year, students have said that they think Somalia will be the most common country of origin, that they think that maybe the United Kingdom might come up quite high, and that India will come up quite high. And when we can compare that, we can say both for this link and for this one's link, we can start to compare those. We're going to do this again in a bit. Let's have a look at another graph. Okay, this graph is talking about you know, when we question people, okay, what did they associate with the word diversity, and whether did they think it had a positive impact or a negative impact? So some people said people's religion, a lot of people said all of the above, okay, they think it's language, religion, country of origin, okay, and we're going to say, well, you know, what does that mean? So here's our modeled example. When most people are questioned on what they associate with the word diversity, they think about people's religion, and we might even add there, they think about people's religion or all of the options given, okay? And our evidence is that more than 100 people who were surveyed, okay, think about religion when they talk about they think about diversity. And that might be because religion is quite visible. It's quite an obvious thing, particularly if we look around school, perhaps. You know, languages spoken, we might hear them, but religion is sometimes shown by the wearing of a headscarf or a turban, okay? So it can be quite obvious what religion someone is when we are looking around our community, okay? And of course, having a large variety of religions has an impact on the diversity of Preston Manor. It's a type of diversity. It's not the only one, okay? We've mentioned some others here, people's country of origin and people's languages spoken, okay? But it isn't the only one. If I wanted to do this in a different way, I could say, when most people are questioned, very few people choose the country of origin or people's languages spoken as a measure of diversity. And we could start to explain that. We could say that the explanation for this is perhaps many people from different countries speak the same languages. Okay, if you are from India or Pakistan, you might speak Urdu. If you are from India or Sri Lanka, you might speak Tamil. If you are from many countries in the Middle East, you will speak Arabic, and maybe different varieties of Arabic, but still Arabic. So the language that people speak is not always a direct link or correlation to the country that they came from. So maybe that is why people have not ranked it very highly in our results, okay? So this is what I want you to write, and I want you to write that on page 12, page 13, 14, and 15, a point, some evidence, an explanation, and a link to another piece of data for each and every graph, okay? That is what is expected here. Some more graphs there, okay? And if you really struggled doing the graphs, if you didn't get to doing that, you can use these graphs here in this presentation, okay? I want to look now at a major link between our two pieces of data. Here on the left, I have our students' countries of origins from the actual data, from the secondary data source from lesson 4A that I gave you, okay? And I have a much better version of that little graph down here at the bottom, that choropleth map, which shows me where people come from. Now, this is the real answer. This is where most students in our school come from. Out of 1,300 and something students, we've got a large number, the largest number actually coming from India, Pakistan, and then followed by Somalia and Sri Lanka and Afghanistan and Iraq. Okay, so if we look here now, we've got where did people think that most people came from, and actually a surprisingly small number of people thought that India was going to be the most common country of origin. Okay, and even this year, so this is this year's students' responses, India still doesn't come up. It comes up as second. Okay, and now the question is, why do people think that Somalia is going to be the most common country of origin? Why do we think we have more Somali students than we really do? How can we explain that? Okay, so when we compare people's perceptions from the survey, what they think, with the actual data, we can see that they are quite different. I'd like you in your analysis, and this is particularly on page 15, okay, in your analysis on page 15, where this graph and this graph belong, okay, I want you to make it really clear that you point out some similarities and differences and suggest reasons for those differences between the perception, what people think, and the reality, what the data actually shows us. Okay, this over here, this is the reality, this is what people think, or this is what people think. Okay, so once you've done that, and it's going to take you some time to do all of that writing, okay, I want you to look finally then at page 16. Page 16 has on it our results. Here's another modelled example if you need that. Okay, so feel free to have a little look at that. Our results from our secondary data analysis. Okay, and this is where we get to compare two pieces of secondary data. One is completely secondary and we haven't had anything to do with it. It is the data from the London Borough of Brent. The second piece of data is secondary data from our school, our diversity data, and you've done these calculations, okay, and your calculations should have looked something like this by the end of it. Okay, this is how they should have come out. Now there is a small change I've put on here, which is that in your graphs this bit here said Oceania, okay, as it did up there in the thing, but if you wouldn't mind just scrubbing it out or typing over it or something like that, just so that we can put Central and South America on there, because we have got 7 students from Central and South America, okay, but we actually have none from Oceania, so there would have been a 0 in here for Oceania, okay, but since we do have Central and South American students, I thought I'd just pop those in there, okay. So let's have a little look then. We've got this data. This first table is the number of students, okay? That is not what I want you to copy into your table. What I want in your table that you should have calculated, okay, and many of you did a good job on this, and I'm glad that you've learned something about how to use spreadsheets from this task, okay? This bit down here goes in these percentages here. So from the old EU, 3.38, 0.74 from old ascension countries and things like that. Okay, so filling that bit in there on that table. And then at the top here, they're asking us for the figures that are totaled by sort of region. Yeah, so although the graph is, you know, when we looked at Brent, if we go back, if we look at Brent, actually 44% of Brent citizens are born in the UK. Okay, whereas from our data, okay, we actually have a small percentage of students who are just identified as from the UK or just British, okay, Europeans 10.59%, Asians 63%, almost 64%, Africans 19, almost 20%, and just 0.5% for Central South America. So can you fill that in for me, please? And then we can write the analysis underneath. So comparing that data, and you don't want to look too much at these ones at the top. You want to mainly look at the tables. Because then we see the following. if we're actually comparing like for like, there are some big differences in these numbers. Still following that Peel structure for me, please. Okay, so picking out what is the overall point, what's the overall trend, where is there a biggest difference, or where do we find a similarity? And I think one of the things you're going to notice is that although the sort of number of Bulgarian and Romanian students and other European students in our school is similar to Brent as a whole, okay, we actually have relatively fewer from old EU countries. We have, well, in Brent as a whole, 5% of people from Middle East and Central Asia, but in Preston Manor, 18% of people from Middle East and Central Asian countries. And with South Asia, a huge difference, 15% of people from South Asia in Brent as a whole, but in Preston Manor School, South Asians make up 45% of the students, okay? So actually big differences. What we notice is that we have larger representations of groups from South Asia and the Middle East and Central Asia, okay, than we do from other areas. And places that are underrepresented, okay, are places like North Africa, which is slightly underrepresented. Certainly Ascension countries are massively underrepresented, so those are European countries. And now we want to think about why that is the case. Can we give an explanation for that? Why is it that Preston Manor is not reflective of Brent as a whole? And of course, we can talk about the location, we can talk about what area of Brent it's in, we can talk about maybe school selections and choices, we can talk about Wembley as opposed to the rest of Brent. Whichever reasons you think, we're putting them in there. So suggest some reasons for the fact that we found that there is very little difference, there is very strong differences between what Brent shows as their diversity and what Preston Manor shows as our diversity. Analyze our data. You're going to have to spend a bit more time on it than the video suggests, but please get that stuff written up and submit it so that your teachers can see. Our last lesson on the conclusions and evaluations is coming up later this week, and then we'll be starting a brand new unit going into the summer term. Bye guys.